Let's go back out to scene 1 and see how this all comes together. First of all, we do not expect to see the laces out here because that animation is inside of a movie clip. So if I'm just looking at the timeline here, I'm not seeing any laces. But we know that if we do a test movie, we should see all of our animations playing. And there we can see the football with the laces flying around mid-flight and the clock counting down. Now I just want to add a few finishing touches here so we can clean up our animation. First of all, the clock's going a little bit fast. We didn't really set it up for seconds or anything like that. And second of all, I'd like to have the home score animate going up by 2 points as soon as the ball sails through the uprights. Now, to synchronize this, we just need to go and look and see when the ball sails through and make note of the keyframe. Right about, let's see, somewhere right in here, maybe about frame 75. That's where the ball officially sails kind of through the uprights there. So I'd like to have the clock count down and get to 1 right before that, and 0 right after. And of course, right at about frame 75, I'd like to have the home score go up. So let's open up our scoreboard movie clip and make a few adjustments. I'll just double click on it. Now, first of all, we can move any of these keyframes around, but we also need to extend all of the animation out much further here. There are a couple of shortcuts that we can use. First of all, if I place my playhead at a midpoint right here on the timeline and don't select any specific frame in any specific layer, when we go over and insert using timeline and insert frames, you can see that our whole animation bumps over by 1 frame. Now, of course, if I selected 1 layer, it would only add frames to that layer. As another shortcut, if you select several frames in a layer, now to do this, I'm going to click on the actions layer up here at the top, and I'm going to shift click at the bottom, and I've grabbed a block of frames now. When you do the same insert timeline frame, instead of adding 1 frame, it adds however many frames you had in the block. And this works whether you use the insert menu or if you use the F5 shortcut key, as I'm doing right now. So that's an easy way to extend your timeline and add additional frames. We can also use the old-fashioned way, which is just to move our timeline out here to where we want it to go. Now, I want my football to be sailing through here at frame 75, so let me have my score finish up out here at frame 90. I'll just select all the layers, press F5, and that's going to extend all of my layers out to that point. Now remember, we want our timeline to stop at the end, so I'm just going to move this keyframe that contains our stop action all the way down here to the end of the timeline. That way our movie clip won't be stopping right in the middle. And next, what I'm going to do is stretch out the positioning of these keyframes that represent the changes in our numbers. Our last keyframe here is where the clock changes to 0, and that needs to be all the way out at the end of the animation. So let me just push that down a little bit and we'll shuffle over here. And I want this pretty much right at the end of the animation, maybe a frame before, as long as it's after frame 75 where the football goes through. Now for the other two, I can just use about 30 frames-ish each for them. Let me put this one out at frame 60. There we go. Make sure to keep it in the same layer as you're dragging it around. Sometimes it can move a little bit on you. And let me select that first keyframe and put it out to about frame 30. That actually works out pretty good. Since our frame rate is 30 frames per second, these will be actual seconds on our time clock. Now we also mentioned that at frame 75, right about here, is where the football sails through. And if we got 2 points, the home score should go up. If I just click on the 14, you can see that it selects the 14 layer for us, showing us where it is. And all I need to do is put a keyframe right at my timeline location. So I'll select frame 75 out of the 14 layer. I'll press F6 and that gives me a keyframe. And now I can make a change and not affect the frames before it. I'll just double click and that'll give me my text tool, and we can just change that to 16. Let's go out and see how that looks. I'm just going to go right from here to a test movie. We see our football spiraling up, the clock counts down, and the numbers go up right before 0. And our animation looks pretty good. Now, there's one more finishing touch that will just be the crowning glory. Let's add a quick sound effect. First, I'm just going to import our sound effect, And since I'm going to import it to the library, it doesn't really matter where I am, if I'm in the scoreboard or scene 1. So I'll just choose Import to Library. And in the Chapter 5 folder, we'll just choose our cheer sound and import it. Now that should have been added to our library here. It's the same sound we used in the last chapter. So let's go out to our main timeline and we'll add a layer for our sound. I always like to put mine up top, so I'm just going to go up to Front Post here and add a layer above that for the cheer sound. We'll name it so we keep things neat. And then I'm going to pick a point for the crowd to start cheering. Probably right when the score goes up. And we're right at frame 75. So let's add a keyframe there. I'll press F6. And at that keyframe, we've got our sound settings. We can just choose the cheer sound. Now there we can see that the cheer sound kind of ramps up from that point and plays on till the end of the animation. It's nice to know that if you leave the default settings of sync at event, the sound will actually finish playing even though the timeline might be stopped from a stop action. So we don't have to worry about it being cut off right at this point. Now we may want to go and set up a little volume change. I'll go to Effect and I can click on Custom down here, or you can also just click on the pencil at the end of Custom, and that brings you right into this Edit Envelope panel. And as we saw before, I've just got some volume settings, and I'm going to knock that down by a little bit more than half on the left and the right channels. I'll click OK to save our changes, and let's see how our final animation turned out. Looks like it was a photo finish. In our next chapter, we're going to be taking a look at another sport, and in doing so, we're going to learn a lot more about controlling motion tweens with the motion editor.